On March 21 of this year, British Deputy Secretary of Defence Annabel Goldie announced in the House of Lords of the British Parliament that the UK will transfer armor-piercing sub-caliber shells to Ukraine. I quote, "Along with providing Ukraine with Challenger 2 tanks, we will supply ammunition, including armor-piercing shells, that contain depleted Uranus." The fact that it was made practically on the eve of the next anniversary of the NATO bombings in Yugoslavia on March 24, 1999, when the alliance's operation called the Angel of Mercy began, makes the statement of the Deputy Minister of Defense particularly cynical. The order to start the bombing of the coalition forces was given by NATO Secretary-General Javier Solano, according to whom the operation was humanitarian. I would like to explain what armor-piercing sub-caliber ammunition is. This is an artillery projectile, the diameter of the active part of which is less than the caliber of the gun, which is used for firing at tanks and armored objects, as a rule, at direct firing ranges. I remind you that depleted uranium is a trivial name for a metal whose basis is more than 90% of the isotopes of uranium-238 and less than 1% of uranium-235. The use of depleted uranium in such ammunition is due to its high density, which ensures their high armor-piercing effect. This effect is achieved by using the kinetic energy of the core itself, as well as its shell. Upon impact with the armor, the shell, made of mild steel, collapses and transfers its energy to the core, which penetrates the armor. Tungsten alloys have similar characteristics, but ammunition based on them is much more expensive to manufacture. In this regard, the manufacture of ammunition with depleted uranium is used much more often in those countries that have uranium reserves and technology for its processing, and their use is planned on foreign territory when there is no need to think about environmental consequences. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the use of ammunition containing depleted uranium does not have a significant advantage over tungsten in modern military operations. It should be noted that in armed conflicts, depleted uranium ammunition was used exclusively by NATO countries, in particular. In 2003 to 2004, the United States widely used such ammunition in delivering strikes on targets in Iraqi cities, Amara, Baghdad, Basra, Karbala, Fallujah. In total, according to the United Nations, the United States used at least 300 tons of depleted uranium in Iraq. As a result, the current radiation situation in the city of Fallujah was much worse than in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the nuclear bombings by the United States. This city is still called the Second Chernobyl. It is necessary to recall the use of aviation munitions with depleted uranium by NATO forces during the bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999. In total, about 40,000 armor-piercing air shells with a total amount of depleted uranium of more than 15 tons were used on the territory of this country. As a result of the impact of ammunition with depleted uranium, a mobile hot cloud of fine aerosol of uranium-238 and its oxides is formed, which, when exposed to the body, can later provoke the development of serious pathologies. The main radiation hazard from depleted uranium occurs when it enters the body in the form of dust. Streams of alpha radiation from small particles of uranium deposited in the upper and lower respiratory tract, in the lungs and in the esophagus, cause the development of malignant tumors, accumulating in the kidneys, in the bone tissue and in the liver. Uranium dust leads to a change in the internal organs. Thus, according to the Iraqi government, in 2005, the incidence of cancer in the country as a result of the use of ammunition with depleted uranium increased from 40 to 1,600 cases for every 100,000 people. In this regard, Baghdad filed a formal lawsuit with the International Court of Arbitration in Stockholm on December 26, 2020 against Washington, demanding compensation for the damage caused. The countries of the former Yugoslavia also report a 25% increase in cancer rates. NATO servicemen who took part in military campaigns in Iraq and Yugoslavia became victims of the irresponsible policy of their own leadership. So, in the report of the Chief Military Medical Inspector of Italy, 2016, it is reported that 4,095 military personnel of the National Armed Forces involved in the Balkans in 1994 to 1999 and in Iraq in 2003. In areas where the forces of the alliance used ammunition with depleted uranium, malignant tumors of various types were subsequently identified. At the same time, in 8% of cases, in 330 people, the diseases ended in death. In addition, remaining in the soil, uranium compounds for a long time retain the danger of a negative impact on people, animals and crops. In a report published in Geneva in 2002 by a group of experts conducting research under the auspices of the United Nations Environment Programme at NATO strike sites, it was noted, and I quote, that the experts were surprised by the fact that more than 2 years after the bombings, particles of depleted uranium were in the air. In addition, the leader of the expert group noted, and I quote, fragments of uranium bombs were found in Serbia in the Plakavica region, which is not indicated on the bombing map presented earlier to the UN by the NATO leadership. The mystery of uranium contamination in Plakois remains unsolved. The level of contamination of soil and groundwater in these areas for a long time requires constant monitoring to assess potential risks. I draw your attention to the documents confirming the awareness of the NATO countries about the danger of the consequences of the use of this type of ammunition, both for the armed forces and for the civilian population, and for the ecology of the territories. Thus, the U.S. Army Environmental Policy Institute's final report to Congress in 1994 on the human health and environmental impacts of the U.S. Army's use of depleted uranium munitions states, and I quote, that technologies to reduce the toxicity of depleted uranium do not exist. Cleaning up areas where depleted uranium munitions are used is extremely difficult. In addition, the 2001 report of the Royal Society of Great Britain on the threat to human health caused by the use of depleted uranium munitions noted, I quote, the main type of cancer in persons affected by the use of depleted uranium munitions is lung cancer. The West is well aware of the negative consequences of the use of depleted uranium ammunition, despite the fact that the use of such ammunition will cause irreparable harm to the health of Ukrainian military personnel and the civilian population. NATO countries, in particular the UK, expressed their readiness to supply this type of weapon to the Kiev regime. Moreover, after the use of projectiles with depleted uranium, significant areas under crops in Ukraine will be contaminated, and radioactive substances will be carried through vehicles to the rest of the territory, in addition to infecting its own population. This will cause enormous economic damage to the agro-industrial complex of Ukraine, primarily crop and livestock production, bringing down any export of agricultural products from the territory of Ukraine for many decades, if not centuries, in the future. Dear friends, if you like this video, please subscribe, like and write a comment. This will greatly help the development of this channel. Thank you.